What's up, you absolutely wonderful Magento loving friends of mine? Joseph here with another practice test question. This one is probably going to be a little tricky. I record these before I see the answers from you all. I say it's going to be tricky. I am guessing it's would fit nicely into the front-end developer expert test. It's not easy. Well, I don't know. As with most things in life, after you've done it a number of times, maybe some things 100 times or other things 1,000 times, it becomes fairly easy. And this one is no different, although I think you can get it in about 1 or 2 times. And this one really focuses on the difference between building out form field validation on UI components versus, I don't know, just a regular input field that's submitted via a form in Magento, using the Magento libraries. And there are some very key differences. And that's when I am trying to hone in on this question. So, without further ado, let's jump over and see what the answer is. You are building a feature to accept email addresses so that multiple people can be notified of a shipment. This appears on the checkout page just above the shipping method selection. You are requested to ensure no one uses the Google Mail Plus feature. So, I don't know if you've used this. I use this all the time, especially when I was doing more development. I would type like Joseph and the plus symbol, and then I would usually put the date, like 2022 09, whatever today's date is, 1-3, and then you can put like an incrementing number, like 01, 02, 03, 04, etc. at SwiftOtter.com, which it all goes to Joseph at SwiftOtter.com, but you can see the 2 in the to email field. It's that plus, and then there's this number associated with it. So if you're testing like a customer, creating the customer registration process, you can just go entry after entry after entry, and it's all unique emails every single time, even though the confirmation email all goes to the same inbox. So I use it all the time. I think Outlook/Microsoft Exchange also has or Outlook 365 has a tool similar to this as well. So done with our rabbit trail, back into the question here. So there are some people who want to avoid this being utilized. So we must build a custom validator, validate order shipping email. What 2 steps does it take to accomplish this in the UI component world? Now, I almost did not put in the UI component world. There's a lot in me that didn't want to do that because I say this is on the checkout page. And I don't know. It seems like that's plenty enough clues as it is, but I made this really clear. So let's see what the answers are, and then we'll jump into the code and see what the code tells us as well. So here are the answers. Number 1, use the $sign or jQuery validator add method. Extend the abstract element UI component. Create a mixin for the validation rules object. Add the rule as a class name to the input element. Okay. Here is the trick. I'm going to take this slightly different approach. I think that'll help our explanation here. This is what I believe are the 2 correct answers, the ones that I would select if I was going through this. Now, I'm just saying, I would have really struggled on this question if I would not have already studied. So underscores, especially as we're going into December 31st deadline for renewing our exams, study is absolutely critical. So take a look here. B and C are the 2 ones that I would select as correct. Now, is A or D correct? Those are both correct in the context of using and applying validation to a specific input element. Those are incorrect. Those do not work in the context of a UI component. UI components have some level of validation built in as well. It's just using different validation rules. Okay, that's Magento for us. So all that to say, this is actually fairly tricky to figure out. And I'm going to do a quick walkthrough as far as what does this take. I found, well, let me back up. Let's look at the code here. We have I'm working through my Chrome tabs. Here we go. All right, so here is our test website. We have this down here. We can see that my validation is working, Joseph plus test at SwiftOtter.com. And here's a visual representation of how I like to do this, like 09, today's the 13th, and then just do 01 or 02 or 03 or 04. And I don't know, just figure it's just something along those lines. Do big jumps, whatever you want to do. You have a unique email address every single time. And I'm not recommending you go bypass trial subscriptions using this method. I'm not recommending that at all. It is very helpful for testing. I will say that. So all of that to say, I started this practice test question thinking that A and D were going to be the correct answers. And I ended this development of the practice test question with selecting B and C. Well, it wasn't quite that cut and dried, but that's kind of the general idea. So what happened? What got me from one to the other? Well, there's documentation. I'm not going to put the link up here just so I don't confuse you on how to create a new type of validation in Magento. And basically, you create a mix-in, and you create a mix-in for the Magento lib library of validation rules. That's fine, except that, and you can apply it then to the input element, which is another part of this. So here's what I started out by doing. So I then dropped on here our input. I put the class in here of the validate shipping email, order shipping email, whatever that class name was, and then I clicked next. Let's hit run off here. I clicked next, and it took me to the payment screen. I'm like, come on, that's not how it's supposed to work. I'm supposed to click next, and it stops me. So I had to go trace back through the code. And this is some not necessarily the easiest code to trace through. So I'm going to give you this link right here. So it's shipping.js, but you should be able to see very small format here. Magento checkout view shipping, JS view shipping. So let's go over here and find I'm going to do this real fast so you're not going to be able to follow along as I find the actual layout. Web.js view shipping. And what a couple ways you can do that. I found I looked in the code here, and I found a couple of references that I used to find the shipping HTML file. But ultimately, at the end of the day, there's nothing like just going and making an assumption, going and trying that out. I tested my assumption out, and that's ultimately how I found it. So in this case, we have our validate shipping information method. And I am going to scroll up here a little bit. Okay. Yep. So we have our validate shipping our validate shipping information. So again, this was based off of assumptions. This is a little bit hard to trace the code through if you're using like a debugger. So feel free to get in there and make some assumptions, set some breakpoints, step through this. So ultimately, I was looking at this and I'm like, okay, the form inline. Source set, this triggered shipping data validate event. Okay, what does this do? Okay, this source, which would be like a data source, it's a UI component data class, trigger shipping address data validate. Okay, so where does this go to? And I literally went on that rabbit hole trying to figure all this out. And this would be the place that I went to. And it's like, okay, well, how do I add an event in here? Where does all this go? And ultimately, this was not the easiest task that I have ever undertaken. I will be very clear there. Let's come into here. It led me to the inside of module UI or Magento UI view base web JS. This is form element abstract. Led me to this file right here. I'm like, oh, well, this must be what the Magento form fields are in UI components are patterned after. Okay. Well, here would be our first answer. Extend the abstract element UI component. Hopefully that was clear enough here. So I changed out, and you'll notice in the commit that I basically swapped this out, form element abstract out for, I think it was previous I was using UI element. Now that also meant that I had I was using the email property as an observable. So that's where the value for this field was set. So I had to change that back to value. Not a huge deal, pretty easy to do. That was set here. So the next aspect of this was, well, how do we actually put in these validations? Now, one other little thing was I found that I can do a shortcut to checkout provider, shipping address, data validate. So basically, that is what was being called right here. This source was known in the UI registry as checkout provider, and I was able to call this event on it. And so I was able to listen to that. And that's where this triggered is validate on here. Well, you'll notice there's no validation here. Well, that's because we are referencing. Oh, and actually here is the one thing that I want to call out. This is how that is assigned. So you could use XML to put these together. That would work just fine as well. But you will notice that this pattern maps out to what you see right here. And that would be the link there. So let's search for validate. Okay, we have validate right here. All right. So this is the validation code in this place. Now, we have some aspects of this. So we have our result, our validator. Well, where does validator come from? Validator comes from right here. Okay, so we're going to open this one up. We have our validate. And we iterate through, we have our rules list. Where does rules list come from? Right here, /rules. So it's in the same directory. Okay, well, here is our rules list. Okay, so then how do we add something into there? Well, then we create a mix-in. And I added a new rule here with the handler, a little bit of regex here, as well as our message on top of that. Oops, we have a little extra line we can clean up right here. And that is the result. So that is our validation rules. We have created actually, as I'm looking at this, it's actually, nope, that is correct. Validation rules, good. So that is the process for creating this. Oh, that was a long run around. That was a little bit complex. But I hope you see the process for getting to this answer. Did I get this process in a second or 10 seconds or 5 minutes? No. To be honest, I spent about 2.5 hours working through this line by line, tracing it out. Was it easy? No. Was I frustrated a couple times? I was like, dude, what did I get myself into? I think I need to come up with a different idea. It's like, nope, I got to push through and get this. And that's the same attitude that you have to have when preparing to pass a test as well. You will find this answer no matter what it takes, even if it makes the least sense of all. It's like the dumbest question or subject you're going after. You're going to knock over every stone. Now, the one caveat here, a quick caveat, is if this subject is going to be covered very little on the test and it's like totally out of your wheelhouse, there is a strategic case to say, I'm not going to worry about this. If I get a question about this that I don't know, I'll just forget about it. Maybe I'll take like half an hour to study it and that's all I'm going to spend on it. I'm going to make sure that I get like a 90% on the rest of the test or do really well on the rest of the test. And if I miss 2 questions about this subject I have no idea about, who cares? So that would be another option to consider there. But validation on the front end test, very, very important. There's your practice test question answer for the week.